The brake pedal goes down. The car doesn't slow. August 18th, 2022. 9:32 p.m. Kite Beach Road, Dubai. 85 kilometers per hour. No skid marks. No warning. Impact. Police arrive within minutes. Lights flashing. A report begins. Single vehicle collision. Suspected mechanical failure. She survives. Pregnant. Injured. The man beside her doesn't wake up. 3 weeks later, doctors say his brain may never fully recover. She stands in the ICU, watching the machines work. No tears. No questions. If this was only a mechanical failure, why does the silence around it feel so deliberate? To understand what happened on that highway, you have to go back. Back to before the accident. Before the marriage. Back to a girl in Cebu City, Philippines, who learned too young that survival meant sacrifice.
Welcome to True Crime Story Files. Real people, real crimes, real consequences, because every story matters. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, and step inside the world where truth meets tragedy.
Jasmine Cruz grew up in a neighborhood where corrugated metal roofs leaked during monsoon season and electricity came in intervals. Her father worked construction when his diabetes allowed it. Her mother sold vegetables at the carbon market 6 days a week. Jasmine was the eldest of 3. That meant her dreams came last. When her sister needed university tuition, Jasmine dropped out. When her father's medical bills piled up, she started looking at overseas work programs. Dubai promised escape. In 2018, at 28 years old, she boarded a plane with a hospitality contract and a work visa sponsored by Jumeirah Hotels. The salary was decent by Philippine standards, enough to send home $200 every month and still have a little left over. She shared a 2-bedroom apartment in International City with 3 other Filipino workers. The smell of adobo cooking mixed with video calls home. Everyone speaking in overlapping Tagalog. Everyone missing families they wouldn't see for years. For 14 months, Jasmine existed in that peculiar invisibility reserved for migrant service workers in Gulf cities. She poured champagne at corporate events, refilled water glasses at wedding receptions, smiled politely while wealthy guests looked through her like she was furniture. October 2019. A private gala at the Burj Al Arab. She was working the royal suite, moving between tables with a tray of champagne flutes, when a man looked up at her differently. Not past her, at her. His name was Rashid Al-Mazroui, 43 years old, Emirati, from a family whose wealth came from real estate developments that reshaped Dubai's skyline. He had the kind of face you saw in business magazines, handsome in an expensive way, with a British accent polished smooth by boarding school years. What Jasmine didn't know then was that Rashid was in the middle of a reputational crisis. His first marriage to Noura, a woman from an equally prominent Emirati family, had ended badly 6 months earlier. There'd been a Ukrainian model. Tabloid whispers. A divorce settlement his father had to personally negotiate. The family patriarch had delivered an ultimatum to his younger son. Rebuild your image, or lose your position managing the family's $400 million real estate portfolio. Rashid wasn't the heir. That was his older brother Khalid, responsible, disciplined, everything their father wanted in a successor. Rashid was the creative one, the disappointment, the son who'd spent his 20s in London galleries instead of learning the business. He needed a redemption story. And Jasmine, with her kind eyes and her humble background, fit the narrative perfectly. The courtship was a whirlwind. He sent cars to pick her up from her cramped apartment, took her to beach clubs where the sand was imported, bought her dresses that cost more than she'd earned in 6 months. Within 6 weeks, he proposed. Her mother called from Cebu, her voice tight with worry. Speaking in rapid Tagalog, she said what Jasmine already knew but didn't want to hear. Men like that don't marry girls like us unless they need something. But Jasmine was tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of sharing a bedroom with 2 other women. Tired of sending money home and having nothing left for herself. When Rashid looked at her, she felt seen. It didn't matter if the reasons were complicated. It felt like oxygen. They married in January 2020. Small ceremony. No grand celebration. His family attended with the enthusiasm of people fulfilling an obligation. His mother, Sheikh Latifa, didn't speak to Jasmine directly. His brother Khalid offered congratulations that sounded rehearsed, his eyes measuring her like an accountant reviewing an expense. The marina penthouse had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Persian Gulf and more square footage than made sense for two people. Separate bedrooms. Rashid explained it as respecting her privacy, but Jasmine noticed he rarely attempted intimacy outside of scheduled necessity. The first year was performance. In public, Rashid played the devoted husband. At family gatherings, he kept his hand on her back, smiled for photographs, introduced her with pride that felt manufactured. In private, he was absent. Business trips to Abu Dhabi, London, Bahrain. Phone calls in rapid Arabic she couldn't follow. Hours locked in his study drinking scotch and reviewing financial documents. Then COVID-19 hit. March 2020. Lockdowns. The world stopped moving. Jasmine was trapped in the penthouse with a man she barely knew. She couldn't see her friends from her hotel days, couldn't leave except for essential errands. The marble floors felt colder, the elevator doors closed like a cell locking. The smell of bleach from the daily deep cleaning filled the air, sterile and suffocating. Rashid's investments, heavily tied to hospitality and tourism, collapsed. She'd overhear him on phone calls, his voice tight with stress, sometimes shouting in Arabic, sometimes silent in a way that felt worse. He drank more, slept less, looked at her like she was another expense he couldn't afford. By September 2021, the facade was gone. She found him in the kitchen at 3 a.m, glass shattered on the marble, whiskey bottle half empty, his eyes unfocused but sharp with desperation. "I need you pregnant," he said. No preamble, no softness. Jasmine stood there in her nightgown, barefoot on cold tile, not understanding. "My father knows about the money I lost, the loans I took from private lenders, the family assets I used as collateral without permission." His hands were shaking. "Unless I prove I'm stable, responsible, with an heir on the way, he's cutting me off. And if those lenders come looking for their money." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Intimacy became a calendar event. Ovulation tracking, clinical precision. When she didn't conceive immediately, he grew sharp, criticized her cooking, her accent, the way she walked, the space she took up in his life. She visited a fertility doctor in secret. Dr. Patel, a British woman with gentle questions Jasmine couldn't answer honestly. "Is everything all right at home?" Stress can affect conception. How could she explain that she felt like equipment being tested for functionality? April 2022. Finally, the test showed positive. Rashid's relief was immediate and transparent. He called his father that same day, voice triumphant. His family softened marginally, gifts arrived, invitations to lunches Jasmine had been excluded from before. For 3 weeks, she let herself hope that maybe this baby would change things, that motherhood would give her value beyond her womb. The hope lasted 21 days. Then Rashid returned to cold indifference. The performance over now that the goal was achieved. The remittance receipts she kept folded in her nightstand told their own story. Every month, like clockwork, she sent money home. Her family depended on it. Her father's insulin, her sister's tuition, the roof repairs after typhoon season. She was the lifeline. And that meant staying, no matter what staying cost. In May 2022, something changed. Rashid mentioned casually over breakfast that he'd increased his life insurance policy. $12 million. He'd named her the sole beneficiary. "It's for family security," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Because of the baby coming." Jasmine nodded, not understanding why that information felt heavy, like a door closing or opening. His father's ring, platinum, engraved with the family crest, sat on the counter between them. Rashid wore it constantly, a reminder of legacy and expectation, of control, not love. Across the penthouse, in his own study, Khalid visited that week. He watched Jasmine for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made her skin prickle. It wasn't anger. It was assessment. The kind of look you give something you're measuring for value or threat. She didn't know it then, But Khalid didn't trust easy narratives, and his brother's sudden marriage to a foreign service worker had never sat right with him. Jasmine stood at the window that night, her hand on her small belly, looking out at Dubai's lights. Somewhere below, in apartments stacked like shipping containers, were women like her, sending money home, surviving, invisible. She pressed her bare feet against the cold marble and wondered how she'd ended up here, in a golden cage, carrying the child of a man who saw her as a solution to a problem. The bleach smell from the evening cleaning lingered. The elevator doors had closed hours ago, the staff gone home. The penthouse was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and Rashid's ice clinking in a glass somewhere down the hall. Jasmine closed her eyes and tried to remember what freedom felt like. She couldn't. Before we continue, I need to say something. Stories like Jasmine's women trapped between survival and surrender, sending money home while losing themselves, existing in marriages that feel more like contracts than partnerships. These stories don't make headlines until something breaks, until desperation turns into tragedy. If you're still here, it tells me you understand that these lives matter. Subscribing helps ensure stories like Jasmine's don't disappear into silence. It's one small way of saying, I see you. These stories deserve to be remembered. Late May 2022, Marina Walk, the kind of morning where Dubai's heat hadn't yet become unbearable, and the coffee shops along the waterfront were filled with expats, killing time between meetings. Jasmine was 8 weeks pregnant. The morning sickness hit without warning, sudden, violent waves that sent her rushing to the bathroom. When she emerged, pale and unsteady, she found a man holding her water bottle. She'd dropped it on her way past his table. You okay? He asked, American accent, genuine concern in his voice. She nodded, took the bottle, mumbled thanks, started to leave. Sit for a second, he said. You look like you need a minute. His name was Dylan Patterson, 34, originally from California, worked in finance for a hedge fund based in DIFC. On the surface, he looked like every other Western expat in Dubai: pressed shirt, expensive watch, the casual confidence that came with a certain tax bracket. What Jasmine didn't see was the desperation underneath. Dylan had a gambling problem, casino debts in Dubai and Macau that had compounded into $300,000 owed to private lenders, the kind of lenders who didn't send collection letters. They sent reminders in person, but that morning he was just a stranger offering kindness. They talked for 20 minutes. Surface-level things, the weather, how long she'd been in Dubai. He mentioned he'd been here for 5 years, liked the city despite its contradictions. She mentioned she was from the Philippines, worked hospitality before, past tense. She didn't explain why. They didn't exchange numbers. It felt like a one-time encounter, the kind of brief connection that happens in cities full of transient people, except they kept running into each other. Same coffee shop, same morning routine. By the third time, it felt less like coincidence and more like pattern. June 2022. They started meeting deliberately. Coffee twice a week, sometimes 3 times. For Jasmine, isolated in that penthouse with a husband who barely spoke to her, these conversations felt like air. Dylan was easy to talk to. He listened, asked questions, treated her like a person, not a function. She mentioned she was married but kept the details vague. He mentioned he worked in finance but never talked about money problems. They existed in that careful space where loneliness meets companionship without demanding full truth. But Dylan had Googled her. By mid-June, he knew exactly who she'd married: Sheikh Rashid Al-Mazrui. The name came with articles, society page photographs, estimates of family wealth that made Dylan's debt feel both crushing and solvable. His tone started changing, slower, more deliberate, questions that felt heavier than they should. Mid-July, they were sitting at their usual table, the gulf stretching out behind them, when Dylan asked a question that shifted everything. Does he have life insurance? Jasmine looked up, startled. What? Your husband. Life insurance. Does he have it? The question hung there, inappropriate and strange. Jasmine should have deflected, should have left. But instead, she answered, he increased his policy last month, made me the beneficiary. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you'd mention any other financial arrangement. $12 million. He said it was for family security. Because of the baby coming. Dylan went very still. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. 12 million. I didn't ask for it, Jasmine added, feeling defensive without knowing why. He just decided. For a long moment, Dylan said nothing. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured, like someone testing weight on thin ice. What if something happened to him? Jasmine's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Not murder. I'm not talking about that. He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping. Just what if there was an accident? Something mechanical, something that just happened. You'd be free, wouldn't you? You and your baby. Actually free. The words landed like stones in still water. Jasmine felt her heart rate spike. Her hands started trembling. I have to go. She stood so quickly her chair scraped against concrete. Dylan reached out, not touching her but stopping her momentum with the gesture. Wait. I didn't mean. But she was already walking away. Fast. Not running, but close. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The Gulf breeze felt suddenly cold against her skin. That night, she couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop replaying the conversation. The way he'd said, accident, like it was a possibility, not a crime. The way he'd looked at her when she mentioned 12 million, like he was doing math in his head. She told herself it was over. She wouldn't go back to that coffee shop. Wouldn't see him again. Whatever that conversation was, it ended there. 3 days passed. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, I'm sorry for what I said, but if you ever want to talk about real options, not just surviving, but actually escaping, I'm here. Dylan. Jasmine stared at the screen for 2 hours. She was sitting in the penthouse nursery, surrounded by furniture Rashid's mother had picked out, thinking about the next 18 years, raising a child in this marriage, teaching her daughter to be small, to be grateful, to accept whatever crumbs of affection came her way. She thought about the remittance receipts in her drawer, the money she sent home every month that kept her family afloat, how all of it depended on staying married to a man who treated her like an appliance. She thought about the life insurance policy. $12 million. Money she'd never asked for, but that now existed, like a door she hadn't noticed before. Her thumbs moved across the screen before her mind caught up. How would it work? She hit send. For a moment, she felt nothing. Then a wave of something she couldn't name, fear, maybe, or relief, or the horrible, weightless feeling of stepping off solid ground. The reply came within minutes. Meet me tomorrow. Same place. 2 p.m. We'll talk. Jasmine set her phone down. Her hands were steady now. Outside the window, Dubai's lights blinked and stretched toward the horizon. Somewhere in that city, Dylan Patterson was looking at his own phone, thinking about $300,000 in debt and a $12 million solution. Neither of them understood yet what they were about to set in motion, how a conversation in a coffee shop would cascade into broken glass and sirens, and a courtroom where both their lives would be weighed and measured and found wanting. But that would come later. For now, there was just a text message, a question, and an answer that couldn't be unsent. The meetings continued through late July 2022. Different coffee shops now, different times. They were being careful without acknowledging why careful mattered. At home, Rashid was getting worse. The pregnancy that was supposed to stabilize his standing with his father had bought him temporary relief, nothing more. His business meetings stretched longer. His drinking started earlier in the day. Some nights, Jasmine would find him in his study at 2 a.m, staring at financial documents with the hollow-eyed focus of someone drowning in numbers. He stopped asking how she felt, stopped touching her belly to feel the baby move. The performance of caring had served its purpose. Now she was just another problem he didn't have the energy to manage. The conversations with Dylan shifted. They stopped pretending this was about friendship or connection. There was an unspoken understanding now, hanging between them like humidity before a storm. Late July. They met at a cafe in JBR, far enough from the marina that familiar faces were unlikely. Dylan ordered coffee he didn't drink. Jasmine sat with her hands folded on the table, 3 months pregnant, feeling the weight of what they were about to discuss. I'm not saying we do anything ourselves, Dylan started, his voice low enough that surrounding conversations would drown it out. "I'm just asking, what if the car had a problem? Mechanical failure, the kind of thing that happens." Jasmine's throat felt tight. "What kind of problem?" "Brakes. They fail sometimes, especially on older vehicles after sustained highway driving. It's documented. Happens more than people think. His Mercedes isn't old. Doesn't matter. Parts wear out. Brake lines can corrode. Fluid can leak." Dylan's tone was clinical now, factual, like he was explaining a financial instrument instead of a death. "He drives alone on Thursdays, right? Those afternoon meetings in Business Bay?" Jasmine nodded slowly. Rashid was religious about those Thursday drives. Always alone. Always the same route Marina to Sheikh Zayed Road to Business Bay. He insisted on driving himself. Said it gave him time to think. She'd never questioned why before. "You'd be home," Dylan continued. "Visible to staff. The nanny, the housekeeper, whoever. Perfect alibi. You wouldn't be anywhere near the car when it happened." The word "it" hung there, unnamed. Not accident, not murder, just "it." Jasmine felt nauseous, though whether from morning sickness or from this conversation, she couldn't tell. How does something like that even? Dylan leaned back slightly, creating distance. "I know someone. A mechanic in Sharjah. He's good with his hands. Discreet. Why would a mechanic do something like that? Because his 8-year-old daughter has a congenital heart defect. She needs surgery the public health system can't provide fast enough. The private hospitals want $50,000 up front. He doesn't have it. He's been trying to raise it for 6 months. Jasmine's hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "Do what? What exactly are you suggesting he'd do?" Dylan's voice dropped even lower. 3 small cuts to the brake lines. Precise locations. The brake fluid leaks slowly during normal driving, but under sustained pressure highway speeds, repeated braking the system fails. Complete loss of brake function. It would look exactly like mechanical failure because that's what it would be. Just accelerated. And after? Quick. No suffering. The impact would be immediate. He wouldn't know what was happening until it was already over. Jasmine closed her eyes. Saw Rashid's face. Not the cold, distant version from recent months, but the version from October 2019, when he'd first looked at her and said she had kind eyes. Before she understood that, even that moment had been transactional. "How much?" she heard herself ask. 50,000. Cash. Untraceable. "I don't have that kind of money." "I do." Dylan's expression was unreadable. "I can get it. Consider it an investment." The word investment made her stomach turn. She stood abruptly. "I need to think." "Don't think too long." Dylan stayed seated. "The mechanic needs the money by mid-August. After that, his daughter's condition gets worse. The window closes." Jasmine walked out into the afternoon heat. The air felt thick, pressing against her skin like a physical weight. Her phone buzzed in her purse probably, Rashid asking where she was, though he rarely cared enough to track her movements anymore. That night, she vomited twice, once from morning sickness, once from everything else. The next few days passed in a fog. She moved through the penthouse like a ghost, preparing meals Rashid barely touched, attending the prenatal appointments he never asked about. The baby moved inside her, small flutters that should have felt like joy but instead felt like accusation. On August 10th, 2022, Dylan withdrew $50,000 from his bank account. He did it in increments across 3 different branches to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. Cash. Untraceable. The money sat in a backpack in his apartment for 2 days while he convinced himself he was really going to do this. On August 12th, he met with Tariq Hassan at a tea shop in Sharjah. Tariq was 39, thin from stress, with the kind of exhaustion that comes from watching your child suffer and being powerless to stop it. His daughter, Aliyah, had been born with a ventricular septal defect, a hole in her heart that was growing as she grew. Without surgery, the doctors said she had maybe 18 months. With surgery, she could live a normal life. Dylan didn't tell him the target's name, didn't give details beyond what was necessary, just showed him a photograph of a black Mercedes SUV and provided the license plate number. "It parks in the Marina Tower's underground garage," Dylan said. "Building C, level 2, spot 37. You'll have access Wednesday night, August 17th. Security cameras in that section have been down for maintenance since Monday. 3-hour window. Tariq's hands trembled as he took the photograph. And after? When they investigate, they won't. Brake failure on older vehicles is common enough that unless there's reason to suspect foul play, they'll write it up as mechanical fault. Happens dozens of times a year in the UAE. Tariq looked at the envelope of cash Dylan slid across the table. 50,000 dirhams. His daughter's life measured in paper. "I'm sorry," Tariq whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was apologizing to. His daughter for what he was about to do? The stranger who would die? God? August 17th, 2022. Wednesday night, 11:47 p.m. Tariq entered the parking garage wearing maintenance coveralls he'd bought at a uniform shop in Dara. A clipboard and toolbox completed the disguise. If anyone asked, he was doing routine brake inspections. No one asked. He found the Mercedes in spot 37. Black. Luxury model. The kind of car that cost more than he'd earn in 5 years. His hands shook as he positioned himself under the vehicle. The brake lines were exactly where they should be reinforced, tubing running from the master cylinder to each wheel. 3 cuts, small enough to create slow leaks. Positioned so the fluid would drain during sustained driving, but not immediately. He made the first cut. Felt the resistance of the tubing, then the give. Brake fluid began seeping out, slow and deliberate. Second cut. His daughter's face filled his mind. Aaliyah laughing. Aaliyah sleeping in a hospital bed with monitors beeping. Aaliyah asking why her chest hurt all the time. Third cut. Done. He cleaned the area, checked for visible fluid pooling, made sure nothing looked obviously wrong. To a casual inspection, everything would appear normal. The brake fluid reservoir would still show adequate levels initially. It was only after sustained driving that the system would fail completely. Tariq slid out from under the Mercedes, gathered his tools, walked back to his van parked 3 levels up. His hands were still shaking. In the driver's seat, he sat for 10 minutes, staring at nothing. "Forgive me," he whispered into the darkness. "Allah forgive me." He drove home. Deposited the cash in 3 different accounts the next morning. Scheduled his daughter's surgery for August 25th. Told his wife the money had come from a work bonus and an uncle's loan. He never asked Dylan the target's name. Never wanted to know. Knowing would make it real in a different way. As long as it stayed abstract, a mechanical problem, a car, a job completed, he could almost convince himself he wasn't a murderer. Almost. In her penthouse, Jasmine's phone buzzed. A single text from Dylan. "It's done. Thursday afternoon. Make sure you're visible at home. This has to look normal." She stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. Deleted the entire text thread. Threw the burner phone in a drawer beneath her lingerie. Outside, Dubai's lights blinked against the darkness. Somewhere in Sharjah, a mechanic couldn't sleep. Somewhere in the marina, a man named Dylan stared at his ceiling and wondered if $50,000 would actually solve his problems or just create worse ones. And in a penthouse on the 43rd floor, a pregnant woman pressed her hands against her belly and tried not to think about what Thursday would bring. August 18th, 2022. Thursday morning. Jasmine woke at 6:30 feeling like her stomach was turning inside out. Morning sickness had been getting worse, not better, as she moved into her 4th month. She made it to the bathroom just in time, retching until there was nothing left but bile and the metallic taste of fear. She knew what today was, what was supposed to happen. Rashid would leave the penthouse around 1:15 for his 2 o'clock meeting in Business Bay. He'd take Sheikh Zayed Road, the route he always took. Somewhere on that highway, after 20 or 30 minutes of sustained driving and repeated braking, the brake fluid Tariq had carefully drained would run dry. The pedal would go soft, then useless. Then Rashid would realize too late that the car wasn't stopping, and Jasmine would be home, visible, with Yuki the nanny preparing the nursery, with the housekeeper cleaning the kitchen, with a dozen small proofs that she'd been nowhere near that car, nowhere near that highway, when the accident happened. She spent the morning moving through practiced normalcy, made tea she couldn't drink, reviewed paint samples for the nursery with Yuki, responded to a text from her mother about her sister's upcoming graduation. Every action deliberate, every movement documented by the rhythms of household routine. At noon, she heard Rashid in his study, on the phone speaking rapid Arabic. His tone was tense. She'd learned to read the patterns of his stress when he was negotiating, when he was desperate, when he was being pressured by people who didn't accept excuses. She pressed her hand against her belly, felt the baby move, a flutter like bird wings. In 4.5 months, this child would be born into whatever came next. Freedom or prison, wealth or deportation, a mother or a murderer. At 1:15, Rashid emerged from his study wearing a tailored suit, car keys in hand. Jasmine was sitting in the living room, a book open in her lap that she hadn't read a single word of. "I'll be back by 4, he said without looking at her. She nodded, watched him walk toward the elevator, listened for the doors to close. This was it, the moment, the plan in motion. Then his phone rang. Rashid stopped, answered. His expression shifted from neutral to frustrated to resigned in the space of 30 seconds. When he hung up, he turned back toward the penthouse. "Change of plans," he said. "Meeting moved to 7 tonight. Dinner at Pirchik instead." Jasmine felt the floor tilt. "Oh, you're coming with me." The words landed like a fist. "What?" "These are the private lenders I've been negotiating with. They want to meet my wife. See that I'm settled. Stable." He said it like he was explaining a business strategy, not risking her life. "Married man with a baby on the way looks responsible. Better credit risk. I'm not feeling well." "You look fine. Wear something nice. We leave at 6:30. "Rashid, I really don't think." "Jasmine." His voice dropped, the edge in it sharp enough to cut. "This isn't optional. These men are the reason I still have a roof over my head. You're going to smile, look pregnant and grateful, and help me prove I'm worth the investment they've made." Understood? She understood. Understood that in his mind, she was a prop, a visual aid in his negotiation for survival. He walked back to his study. Door closed. Jasmine sat frozen on the couch until she couldn't breathe properly and had to lock herself in the bathroom. She pulled out the burner phone from behind the towels where she'd hidden it, hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to type the message. "Meeting changed. He wants me in the car. Tonight." Dylan's response came in seconds. "What? When?" 7 p.m. dinner. Pirchik. He's insisting I go with him. Tell him you're bleeding. Fake an emergency. Do not get in that car." Her fingers trembled on the screen. "He won't listen. He needs me there to look stable for the lenders. Can we stop it? Call the mechanic?" Tariq's gone dark. Took his money and disappeared. I can't reach him. "Jasmine, that car is a death trap. The brake lines are cut. You cannot get in that car." She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. 4 months pregnant. Dark circles under her eyes. Trapped. If she refused too insistently, Rashid would ask questions. Why are you so desperate not to get in the car? Why today, specifically? Why this particular vehicle? Suspicion was worse than danger. Suspicion led to investigations, to mechanics inspecting brake lines, to questions neither she nor Dylan could answer. But if she got in that car... Her phone buzzed again. "The brakes won't fail immediately." Tariq said the system would degrade over 20 to 30 minutes of sustained driving. "Maybe you can avoid the highway? Take coastal roads? Buy time? Maybe." That word. Maybe the brakes would hold. Maybe they could take a different route. Maybe she'd survive. Maybe the baby would survive. Maybe, she typed back. What if I can't avoid it? What if he takes the highway? The response took longer this time. When it came, it was just 3 words. Then, God help you. Jasmine sat on the bathroom floor, phone clutched in shaking hands, and tried to calculate survival odds against suspicion risk. Tried to weigh her life against the exposure of a conspiracy that could send her to prison for decades. The math didn't work. There was no equation where she won. At 6 o'clock, she put on a navy dress that accommodated her growing belly, applied makeup to hide how pale she looked, brushed her hair, every movement mechanical, divorced from thought. Rashid was waiting by the elevator at 6:25. "Ready?" "No." "Yes." They rode the elevator down in silence, walked through the lobby where the concierge nodded politely. crossed to the parking garage. Building C, Level 2, Spot 37. The black Mercedes sat there, gleaming under fluorescent lights, looking completely normal, looking like every other luxury vehicle in Dubai's endless parade of wealth. Jasmine's hand was on the door handle. This was the moment. The last chance to refuse, to fake sudden illness, to do anything except get in. But Rashid was already behind the wheel, starting the engine, looking at her with impatience. "Come on, we're going to be late." She got in, closed the door. The sound of it shutting felt final, like a coffin lid. She pulled the seatbelt across her belly, the click of it locking impossibly loud. Rashid pulled out of the parking spot, up the ramp, out into the early evening traffic of Dubai Marina. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful, the kind of sunset that made you glad to be alive. Jasmine pressed her hand against her belly, felt the baby move again. "I'm sorry," she whispered, too quiet for Rashid to hear. They drove through the marina, past the coffee shops where she'd met Dylan, past the walking paths where she'd pushed through morning sickness and loneliness, past the life she'd tried to build in the spaces between survival and surrender. The brakes worked fine. Stop-and-go traffic, red lights, crosswalks. Every application of the brake pedal normal, responsive. Maybe Tariq had failed. Maybe the cuts hadn't been deep enough. Maybe. Then Rashid merged onto Sheikh Zayed Road. Highway speed, 70, 80, 90 kilometers per hour. The city blurring past on both sides. Jasmine's hands gripped the armrest. Every kilometer felt like counting down to detonation. 20 minutes. That's what Dylan had said. 20 to 30 minutes before complete failure. They'd been driving for 18 minutes when Rashid exited toward Jumeirah Beach Road, coastal route to Pirchik. Maybe they'd make it. Maybe the restaurant was close enough that sustained brake use wouldn't. Traffic light ahead. Red. Rashid pressed the brake. The pedal felt soft, mushier than it should. Rashid frowned, pressed harder. The car slowed, but not as quickly. Not with the immediate response luxury brakes should have. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Another light, another application. This time the pedal sank further. The car took longer to stop. Jasmine couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. They were approaching Kite Beach intersection. Traffic moderate. Streetlights beginning to glow in the gathering dusk. Rashid pressed the brake again. The pedal went to the floor. Nothing. No resistance. No pressure. Just empty space where stopping power should be. His eyes widened. He pumped the pedal. Nothing. Tried the emergency brake. The car barely slowed. Jasmine. They were still going 60 kilometers per hour. A concrete barrier loomed ahead where the road curved. Rashid yanked the wheel, trying to swerve, but physics and momentum don't negotiate. The impact sounded like the world ending. Metal crumpling, glass exploding inward, airbags deploying with the force of small explosions. Jasmine's head snapped forward, then back. Her collarbone cracked like a branch. Pain flooded through her in waves she couldn't separate or name. Then silence. Then sirens, distant but approaching. Then darkness. Stories like this usually get simplified, reduced to headlines that miss how people end up here. If you're still watching, it means you understand why the full truth matters, not just the crime. Subscribing helps ensure these stories are told completely, not buried or forgotten. Jasmine woke in American hospital 2 days after the crash. The first thing she registered was the smell antiseptic sharp enough to burn the back of her throat. Then the sounds. Machines beeping in steady rhythm, footsteps in hallways, muffled voices speaking medical terminology she didn't understand. Her collarbone was fractured, severe bruising across her chest and abdomen from the seatbelt, whiplash, concussion. But the baby miraculously, impossibly, the baby had survived. The ultrasound technician had said it 3 times, like she couldn't believe it herself. Strong heartbeat, no signs of distress. Your body protected her. Rashid was 3 floors up in the ICU. Traumatic brain injury, spinal damage at the T7 vertebra, multiple fractures. The impact had been on the driver's side, and he'd absorbed the worst of it. The doctors used words like critical and uncertain prognosis, and we'll know more when he wakes up. If he wakes up, Dubai police arrived on August 20th. 2 officers, polite but perfunctory. They asked standard questions. Where were you going? How fast was the vehicle traveling? Did you notice anything unusual before the crash? Jasmine answered carefully. Dinner reservation, normal speed. No, nothing unusual. The brakes just failed. They took notes. Thanked her for her cooperation. Left within 20 minutes. The initial police report was filed within 24 hours of the accident. The conclusion was brief and definitive. Single vehicle collision on Jumeirah Beach Road. Mechanical brake failure suspected. No suspicious circumstances. Case classified as traffic accident. No further investigation warranted. There had been a witness, a Filipino taxi driver named Berto Cruz who'd been 2 cars behind the Mercedes. He told the responding officer he'd seen another vehicle, a white sedan, following unusually close to the Mercedes before the crash. Mentioned it seemed odd, the way the sedan had accelerated away immediately after the impact, instead of stopping to help. That statement was filed, then misfiled. Somehow it ended up in a different case folder entirely, a fender bender from 2 weeks prior. By the time anyone realized the error, the statement was buried under hundreds of other traffic reports, and Officer Mansour, who'd taken the original statement, had been reassigned to a different district. The CCTV footage request was submitted on August 21st. Standard procedure for serious accidents: pull footage from traffic cameras along the route to reconstruct the incident. But Dubai's traffic management system was backlogged. Budget cuts had reduced the technical staff, and there were 73 pending footage requests ahead of this one. The request sat in a queue for 2 weeks before anyone even looked at it. The forensic brake examination happened on August 22nd. The standard protocol required a senior automotive forensic specialist to inspect any vehicle involved in a fatal or near-fatal collision. But the senior specialist was on vacation in Lebanon, and the department was understaffed. A junior technician named Hamza, fresh out of training with less than 6 months on the job, performed the inspection. He saw brake fluid pooled under the vehicle, checked the reservoir low, assumed the impact had damaged the lines. Noted brake system failure consistent with collision trauma in his report and signed off. He didn't check for pre-existing cuts, didn't measure the precision of the line ruptures, didn't question whether the damage was from the crash or from something that caused the crash. The insurance company received Dubai Police's report on August 23rd. An investigator named Faisal reviewed it remotely, never visited the scene, never examined the vehicle personally. The police had concluded mechanical failure, high-profile family, quick resolution, no red flags. He accepted the conclusion and closed his file. The $12 million policy wouldn't pay out anyway. Rashid was alive. Injured, but alive. By August 25th, 72 hours after the crash, the case was officially closed. Why did the system fail so completely? The officers who responded were handling 8 other cases that week. Dubai's traffic department was perpetually overworked, underfunded, stretched too thin across a city where accidents happened daily. High-profile families wanted quick resolutions, not prolonged investigations that might suggest negligence or invite scrutiny. And foreign workers, even those married into wealthy families, rarely got the kind of attention that citizen victims commanded. There was no obvious motive, no life insurance payout since Rashid survived, no bitter divorce proceeding, no public animosity, just a tragic accident involving brake failure, the kind of mechanical problem that happens sometimes despite the best maintenance. The system looked at what was in front of it, checked the boxes, and moved on. On September 4th, Rashid emerged from his coma, but the man who woke up wasn't the man who'd gotten in that car. The traumatic brain injury had damaged his frontal lobe, the part responsible for executive function, impulse control, emotional regulation. His speech was slurred, his memories fragmented. He couldn't walk. Physical therapy might restore some mobility, the doctors said, but the cognitive impairment was likely permanent. Jasmine was discharged from the hospital on September 7th and returned to the Marina penthouse, but now the space was transformed. Hospital bed in the master suite, monitoring equipment, mobility aids, 2 nurses working 12-hour shifts, Patricia, a Filipina woman in her 50s with 20 years in rehabilitation care, and James, a Kenyan man with gentle hands and infinite patience. The nanny, Yuki, had stayed throughout, preparing the nursery for a baby due in 5 months. Now her role expanded. She became another set of eyes, another layer of the surveillance that had turned the penthouse into a medical facility that felt more like a prison. Jasmine became a caregiver to the man she'd tried to kill, fetching water, adjusting pillows, sitting beside him during therapy sessions where he relearned how to grip a spoon. The irony was suffocating. The $12 million life insurance policy was worthless now. Rashid was alive, disabled, dependent, but alive. There would be no payout, no freedom, no escape to the Philippines with enough money to rebuild her life. She was still trapped, just differently, with more witnesses, more surveillance, nurses who watched her interactions with Rashid, staff who noticed when she seemed stressed or distant or relieved when his therapy sessions went poorly. Dylan sent one text from a new burner phone. Heard about the accident. Thank God you survived. Don't contact me again. We never met. She deleted it immediately. Threw that phone away too. They couldn't speak, couldn't coordinate stories, could only hope that the police investigation stayed closed and that whatever forensic evidence existed stayed buried under bureaucratic incompetence. But there was someone who didn't believe in convenient accidents. Khalid Al-Mazroui stood in the parking garage in early September, looking at the space where his brother's Mercedes had been parked. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. Rashid was many things: reckless, financially irresponsible, emotionally immature, but he maintained his vehicles meticulously. Brake failure on a 3-year-old Mercedes with regular dealer service made no sense. And then there was Jasmine, the foreign wife who'd appeared out of nowhere, the $12 million insurance policy, the fact that she'd been in the car but survived while Rashid was destroyed. Khalid was a man who trusted evidence, not instinct. But his instinct was screaming. On September 15th, he hired a private forensic team, engineers who specialized in automotive failure analysis. He had them examine the Mercedes, which was still impounded in a police lot, waiting to be released back to the family. On September 18th, he hired Mohammed Al-Hashimi, a former CID investigator who'd retired early and now worked private cases. Mohammed had 30 years of experience and a reputation for thoroughness that bordered on obsession. I want to know everything, Khalid told him in his DIFC office. About my brother's wife, about the accident, about anyone she's been in contact with. Everything. Mohammed nodded, made notes, asked careful questions. What are you expecting to find? I don't know yet, Khalid said. But when something looks this clean, it usually means someone cleaned it. The private forensic team found the truth in 48 hours. Tool marks on the brake lines, cuts too precise to be collision damage, patterns consistent with deliberate sabotage, not mechanical failure or impact trauma. Mohammed found Jasmine's coffee shop meetings on building security footage, found Dylan Patterson's name, found his $300,000 gambling debt, found the $50,000 withdrawal from his account on August 10th. By October, Khalid had enough to reopen the case, not through Dubai police, who'd already closed it, but through federal investigators, through channels his family's connections could access. The trap was being set. Jasmine just didn't know it yet. While Jasmine adjusted to her new role as caregiver, Khalid Al-Mazroui was building a case. October 2022. The private forensic team delivered their report. The brake lines showed 3 distinct cut marks, clean, precise, made with professional tools. The fluid loss pattern was inconsistent with collision damage. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was sabotage, executed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. November 2022. Mohammed Al-Hashimi, the former CID investigator, traced the CCTV footage that Dubai police had never retrieved. Traffic cameras along Jumeirah Beach Road, security feeds from the Marina Walk area. He compiled 6 months of footage, running facial recognition software on anyone who appeared repeatedly near Jasmine. One face kept showing up. An American man. Same coffee shop, same time slots. 4 documented meetings between late May and mid-July 2022, weeks before the accident. Mohammed ran the face through immigration databases and got a name. Dylan Patterson, 34 years old, American citizen. Work visa sponsored by Bridgewater Capital, a hedge fund in DIFC. Current address, Marina Heights, Tower B. December 2022. Mohammed pulled Dylan's financial records not easy, but money talks in Dubai. And Khalid had plenty of it. The records showed a pattern of casino transactions, large losses in Dubai, Macau, and online platforms. Then something interesting. A $50,000 cash withdrawal on August 10, 2022, 8 days before the accident. Mohammed kept digging. He found Tariq Hassan by cross-referencing automotive mechanics in Sharjah with recent large deposits. Tariq's account showed 50,000 dirhams deposited on August 13th, 3 deposits across 2 days, each just under the amount that would trigger automatic fraud monitoring. On August 25th, exactly 1 week after the accident, Tariq had paid for his daughter's heart surgery at Zulika Hospital. The timing was damning. By January 2023, Khalid had a narrative. Dylan Patterson, drowning in gambling debt, had hired a mechanic to sabotage his brother's car. Jasmine, the beneficiary of a $12 million life insurance policy, was the obvious connection. The coffee shop meetings proved they knew each other. The timing proved intent. But knowing and proving in court were different things. Khalid needed them to incriminate themselves. He needed a confession or, failing that, evidence of ongoing conspiracy. On January 12, 2023, Jasmine gave birth to Amara, a daughter, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy despite everything her mother's body had been through. Rashid was still in rehabilitation, his cognitive function improving marginally but still impaired. He met his daughter for the first time in a wheelchair, holding her awkwardly with hands that trembled from nerve damage. Jasmine looked at her baby and felt a love so fierce it was indistinguishable from terror. This child was the only pure thing in her life, and she was going to lose her. She could feel it coming the way you feel a storm building pressure in the air, electricity crackling at the edges of everything. February 2023. Khalid set the trap. He started a rumor through the household staff. Casual mentions during shift changes, deliberate conversations within Jasmine's earshot. Dr. Sharif was amazed at Rashid's progress. His memory was returning with unusual clarity. He was starting to remember details from the accident, specific moments, the feeling of the brake pedal going soft, the seconds before impact. Khalid scripted it carefully. He needed Jasmine to panic, but not so much that she'd run, just enough to make her reach out to her co-conspirator. March 15, 2023. Rashid confronted Jasmine in the living room. Nurse Patricia was in the next room, close enough to hear if anything escalated. Khalid had coached his brother on what to say, feeding him lines like a prosecutor prepping a witness. Something was wrong with the car, Rashid said, his speech still slurred but the words clear enough. Someone did something to it. Before the accident, Jasmine's hands froze on the onesie she was folding. What do you mean? The brakes didn't just fail. They were tampered with. The police missed it, but Khalid hired investigators. They found evidence. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might be visible through her shirt. That's impossible, the police said. The police were wrong. Rashid looked at her with eyes that were clearer than they'd been in months. And you know what's interesting? There's a $12 million life insurance policy with your name on it. You're the one who gets rich if I die. I didn't want that policy. You took it out. I know, but someone knew about it. Someone who might have thought it was worth the risk. Jasmine stood abruptly. I need to check on Amara. She fled to the nursery, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the doorknob. This was it. They knew, or suspected, or were close enough that the difference didn't matter. That night, she couldn't sleep, couldn't think. Every sound in the penthouse felt like footsteps approaching. Every phone call Khalid took in his study felt like police coordination. She lasted 3 weeks. April 3rd, 2023. 11 p.m. Jasmine went to a drawer in her closet where she'd hidden a new burner phone, purchased months ago in case she ever needed to contact Dylan. She'd told herself she never would, that the silence between them was their best protection. But fear is louder than wisdom. She typed out a message with trembling fingers. He's remembering everything. They're reopening the investigation. We need to meet. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. What Jasmine didn't know was that 3 months earlier, federal investigators operating on Khalid's evidence had obtained a warrant to monitor any new phone activations and communications linked to either her or Dylan's known devices. The technology was sophisticated, supplied by Abu Dhabi's State Security Department. Any burner phone that pinged off the same cell towers as their registered devices would be flagged for monitoring. Her text was intercepted within seconds. In a secure office in Abu Dhabi, federal investigator Amira Al-Kaabi read the message on her screen. She looked at her partner, Detective Hassan Farouk, and nodded once. "That's our probable cause," she said quietly. "Get surveillance teams ready. I want eyes on both of them starting now." Dylan's response came 20 minutes later. "Tomorrow, Marina Mall Food Court, 3 p.m. Be careful." Both messages were logged, recorded, added to an evidence file that was growing thicker by the day. Khalid received a call at 11:40 p.m. Amira Al-Kaabi, updating him personally. "Your instinct was correct. She just reached out to Patterson. They're meeting tomorrow. We'll have audio and visual surveillance in place." "Will it be enough for arrest?" Khalid asked. "If they say what we think they're going to say, yes, more than enough." Khalid hung up and stood at his office window, looking out at Dubai's lights. His brother was asleep in a hospital bed converted into a bedroom 3 floors below. His niece was sleeping in a nursery down the hall, and the woman who'd tried to destroy them both was about to walk into a trap she didn't see coming. Justice, he thought, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, built piece by piece until the weight of evidence became inescapable. Tomorrow, that evidence would speak for itself. April 4th, 2023, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Dubai Marina Mall's Level 2 food court buzzed with the ordinary rhythm of a weekday lunch crowd. Filipino families shared meals between shopping trips. Western expats typed on laptops over cooling coffee. The smell of fried chicken mixed with curry and fresh pizza. Above it all, mounted discreetly near ceiling support beams, federal surveillance cameras tracked every angle. Jasmine arrived first. She'd left Amara with Nurse Patricia, claiming she needed to pick up baby supplies from Boots. Her hands were shaking as she ordered a bottled water she wouldn't drink. She chose a table near the back corner, away from the main flow of traffic but visible enough not to seem suspicious. The irony wasn't lost on her trying to hide in plain sight, while federal investigators watched from monitoring stations she didn't know existed. Dylan showed up 12 minutes late. He looked worse than she remembered. The expensive watch was gone, probably pawned. His shirt was wrinkled, collar slightly frayed. The confidence that had made him seem untouchable 8 months ago had been replaced by something hollow. He sat down without ordering anything, his eyes darting around the food court like he expected police to materialize from between the Subway and KFC counters. In an unmarked surveillance van parked in the mall's lower garage, federal investigator Amira Al-Kaabi adjusted the directional microphone array. The technology was sophisticated, borrowed from Abu Dhabi's state security apparatus, and capable of isolating conversations in crowded spaces by filtering out ambient noise. Beside her, Detective Hassan Farouk monitored 3 video feeds simultaneously. Every word would be recorded, every gesture documented. "Audio check," Amira said quietly into her headset. "Clear reception," came the response from the technical specialist. "We're getting clean pickup even with the food court noise." Dylan leaned forward, keeping his voice low but not low enough. "You shouldn't have contacted me. We agreed no communication." "I didn't have a choice." Jasmine's voice was tight, barely controlled. "Khalid hired investigators. Private forensics found tool marks on the brake lines. They know it wasn't just mechanical failure." "Jesus." Dylan ran his hands through his hair. "What about the mechanic?" "If they find the mechanic, they will." Jasmine cut him off, her desperation overtaking caution. "We need to finish this." In the surveillance van, Amira straightened. "Did she just say what I think she said?" Hassan was already marking the timestamp. "Got it. That's our first admission of ongoing conspiracy." The audio feed captured every syllable. Amira would later isolate that line, "We need to finish this," and play it 17 times during the trial. Each repetition would land like a hammer blow, destroying any defense argument that Jasmine had been manipulated or coerced. Dylan recoiled, his face going pale. Are you serious right now? You're talking about murdering him. In a hospital bed, surrounded by witnesses and medical staff monitoring him around the clock. I'm talking about survival. Her voice rose slightly, drawing a glance from a nearby table. She lowered it again, but the intensity remained. Pills that stop his heart. An accident during a transfer to his wheelchair. Something that looks natural. I'll lose Amara if they convict me. I'll lose everything. Maybe we run instead. Dylan's suggestion sounded desperate even to his own ears. Mexico, Philippines. Take whatever money you can access and disappear. They'll find us. Jasmine shook her head. The Al-Mazrouz have resources everywhere. Khalid has connections in every embassy between here and Manila. You think we can hide from that kind of reach? The silence between them stretched out, filled with the ambient noise of the food court, a child's laughter, the clatter of trays, the whir of air conditioning struggling against Dubai's heat seeping through the glass skylights. We should have never, Dylan started, but couldn't finish the sentence. Should have never what? Met? Planned? Cut those brake lines? Every version of that sentence led to the same place, complicity in attempted murder. But we did. Jasmine's response was simple, final, 2 words that acknowledged everything they couldn't take back. Hassan zoomed in one of the camera feeds, capturing the despair on Dylan's face. He knows it's over. Look at his body language. Amira was already typing notes. We have enough for arrest warrants. Admission of the original conspiracy. Discussion of second murder plot. Acknowledgement of joint criminal activity. This is textbook conspiracy under Article 45 of the UAE Penal Code. Back in the food court, Dylan pulled out his phone. I need to show you something. The mechanic's daughter, she's alive because we paid for her surgery. Doesn't that count for anything? Count for what? Reduced sentence? Jasmine's laugh was bitter. You think a judge cares that we funded a child's heart surgery with blood money? That just proves premeditation. We paid someone to kill my husband. He's not dead, though. That's the one thing working in our favor. He might as well be. The words came out cold, harder than she intended. The brain damage destroyed who he was. Some days he doesn't recognize his own daughter. In the van, Amira made a note. That statement would be used against her too, showing callousness toward her disabled victim, lack of remorse, continued animus that supported the prosecution's argument for ongoing threat. Dylan stood up abruptly. I can't do this anymore. Whatever you're planning, count me out. I'm not killing anyone else. You already did. Jasmine remained seated, looking up at him. The moment you found that mechanic, you killed Rashid. The fact that he's technically still breathing doesn't change what we are. What are we? Murderers who failed. She said it flatly, like stating an accounting fact. And now we're going to prison for it. Dylan walked away without another word. He made it 15 feet before his knees buckled slightly. He caught himself on a pillar, stood there for a moment, then continued toward the exit. He would later tell police that he knew in that moment it was over. That somewhere, somehow, they'd been caught. The only question was when the handcuffs would appear. Jasmine sat alone at the table for 11 more minutes. She didn't cry, didn't check her phone, just stared at the untouched water bottle and thought about Amara learning to say, Mama, in a language she might never hear clearly again. At 3:47 p.m., she finally stood up and walked back through the mall toward the parking garage. She passed families shopping for Eid gifts, couples browsing jewelry stores, teenagers clustered around the cinema entrance. Normal life continuing while her own life counted down in hours, maybe minutes. She didn't notice the man in the Carrefour uniform restocking shelves who spoke quietly into a concealed radio. Didn't see the woman in business attire who'd been sitting 2 tables over, laptop open but eyes tracking. Didn't recognize that she'd just walked through the most surveilled 15 minutes of her life. In the monitoring van, Amira closed her laptop and nodded to Hassan. Contact Abu Dhabi. Tell them we have probable cause for immediate arrest. I want federal warrants issued tonight. Hassan was already dialing. Charges? Conspiracy to commit murder under Article 332. Attempted murder under Article 335. Insurance fraud under Federal Decree Law 14 of 2018. criminal tampering. Start with those and we'll add more after arraignment. Across Dubai, in Khalid's DIFC office, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Amira's secure line. "Mr. Al-Mazroui, we're moving forward. The meeting gave us everything we needed." Khalid stood at his window, looking out toward the marina where his brother's wife was driving back to the penthouse, unaware that federal prosecutors were already drafting arrest warrants with her name on them. "When?" 72 hours maximum. We need to coordinate with multiple jurisdictions since Patterson is an American national. But by Sunday morning, both will be in custody. And the mechanic? Already arrested this morning. Sharjah police picked him up at 6 a.m. Once he learned his daughter's medical records would be subpoenaed showing the surgery payment came from Dylan Patterson, he agreed to full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentencing. Khalid hung up and made one more call. To his brother. Rashid answered on the third ring, his speech still slurred but comprehensible. "Khalid? It's done. They recorded everything. She's going to prison, Rashid. She's going to lose Amara. Everything she tried to take from you, she's going to lose herself." On the other end, Rashid was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was sad rather than triumphant. "I trapped her first, you know. The marriage, the pregnancy, the isolation. I created the cage before she tried to kill me. That doesn't excuse attempted murder. No, but it explains it." Rashid shifted in his wheelchair, the movement audible over the phone. "Make sure Amara never knows the whole story. Let her remember her mother as someone who made mistakes, not as someone who became a monster. She became a monster when she cut those brake lines. She became desperate long before that. I just didn't care enough to notice." Khalid ended the call and returned to looking out at the city. Justice was coming, but standing there in his glass office, watching Dubai's lights begin to glow as evening approached, he didn't feel the satisfaction he'd expected, just the hollow weight of having been right about something he'd wished he'd been wrong about. Somewhere in that same city, Jasmine tucked Amara into her crib for what would be one of her last nights as a free woman. She sang a Tagalog lullaby her own mother had sung to her, her voice cracking on the familiar words. And in a cramped apartment in Sharjah, Tariq Hassan held his daughter Aliyah close, her healed heart beating strong against his chest, knowing that his testimony would destroy 2 lives to save his own. The evidence was compiled. The warrants were being drafted. The trap had closed. All that remained was the arrest. April 7th, 2023, 5:40 in the morning. Inside the marina penthouse, Jasmine lifted Amara from the crib, speaking softly in Tagalog. She laid her on the changing table, reaching for a fresh diaper when heavy footsteps filled the hallway. 5 officers entered wearing tactical gear. Behind them, federal investigator Amira Al-Kabi held a document folder. "Jasmine Cruz Al-Mazroui, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and insurance fraud." Jasmine's hands froze. "Wait, I need to finish." Step away from the child. Nurse Patricia appeared and lifted Amara from the table. The baby's cries intensified as metal clicked around Jasmine's wrists. "Amara!" Her voice broke as officers moved her toward the door. "Please, let me just hold her." "Mama!" Amara's scream cut through everything. "Mama! Mama!" The elevator doors closed on the sound of her daughter's crying. 45 minutes later, Dylan opened his apartment door to find officers waiting. He looked at the badges and simply nodded, holding out his wrists without resistance. Under UAE law, both were presented to the public prosecution within 48 hours, questioned within 24 hours, and formally charged. Pre-trial detention followed months of legal preparation, evidence compilation, and witness coordination. The complexity of the case, involving international defendants and extensive forensic analysis, meant the trial wouldn't begin until October 2023, 6 months after the arrests. October 12, 2023, Abu Dhabi Federal Criminal Court. The trial opened before a 3-judge panel, led by Qadi Ibrahim al-Shamsi. Federal prosecutor Saeed al-Mansouri presented methodically, forensic reports showing precise brake line cuts inconsistent with collision damage. Tariq Hassan testified from a plea agreement, his voice steady but hands shaking. "Mr. Patterson paid me 50,000 dirhams, He showed me the Mercedes, the parking spot, told me exactly what to do. Surveillance photographs came next. 4 meetings between Jasmine and Dylan, each time-stamped and location verified. Dylan's $50,000 withdrawal on August 10th, Tariq's matching deposits, the $12 million insurance policy with Jasmine as beneficiary, increased just months before the sabotage. Then the Marina Mall recording played through courtroom speakers. Jasmine's voice echoed. "We need to finish this." The line repeated, isolated, emphasized. Each repetition landed like a physical blow. The trial stretched across 7 weeks. Defense attorney Maria Santos argued Jasmine was trapped in an exploitative marriage, isolated and desperate. "My client made terrible choices, but those choices were made by a woman with no exit and no hope." The prosecution's rebuttal was devastating. Victims don't hire mechanics to cut brake lines, and victims certainly don't, when caught, discuss finishing the job. That recording, "We need to finish this," those are not the words of someone trapped. Dylan's attorney, Jeffrey Walsh, claimed Dylan acted alone, that Jasmine didn't know. But the audio destroyed that defense. The conversation made clear both understood exactly what they'd done and were considering doing next. November 30th, 2023. After 4 days of deliberation, the judges returned. The courtroom was packed. Khalid sat front row, Rashid beside him in his wheelchair. Jasmine's mother sat alone in back, crying quietly. Judge Al-Shamsi read the verdict in Arabic, with simultaneous translation. "This panel finds both defendants guilty on all charges." Jasmine's knees buckled. Officers caught her arms. Dylan Michael Patterson, guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy, criminal tampering, 25 years federal prison, followed by permanent deportation. Dylan stood motionless. 25 years. He'd be nearly 60 when released. Jasmine Cruz Al-Mazrui, guilty of conspiracy to attempted murder, insurance fraud, 18 years federal prison, followed by permanent deportation. But Judge Al-Shamsi continued. Additionally, pursuant to UAE Personal Status Law Article 113, which requires custodians to be morally upright and not convicted of crimes affecting honor, this court terminates Jasmine Cruz's parental rights effective immediately. Custody transfers to the paternal family. Jasmine collapsed completely, hitting the floor before officers could catch her. Her scream was raw, primal. "Amara! No! Please! She's my baby!" Security lifted her as she thrashed and screamed. "Amara, Mama's sorry. Mama loves you." Her voice echoed through courthouse hallways long after they'd removed her. In the gallery, Rashid sat in his wheelchair, tears running down his face. Khalid's hands gripped his armrests until his knuckles went white. This was justice. He'd fought for it, but it felt nothing like he'd expected. Jasmine's mother walked out quickly, unable to watch. She went directly to the airport, returning to Cebu having lost her daughter to 18 years and her granddaughter to a family that would raise her as their own. The sentences were final. Neither defendant appealed. Within days, Jasmine transferred to Al-Awar Women's Prison. Dylan went to the men's facility 3 kilometers away. They would spend the next 18 and 25 years removed from society, ensuring they never forgot why. The $12 million insurance policy was voided. The policy excluded payment when the beneficiary was convicted of attempting to harm the insured. Neither Rashid nor Jasmine would receive anything. In the Marina penthouse, Nurse Patricia packed the nursery. Amara's clothes, toys, the mobile playing Tagalog lullabies all moved to Khalid's Emirates Hills home where a full-time nanny waited. The child would want for nothing materially, but she'd grow up without her mother, raised by family that would struggle to explain why. The story made headlines briefly. Foreign wife convicted in Sheikh murder plot. The articles ran 3 days before being displaced by newer scandals. Dubai moved on. But for those whose lives shattered with those brake line cuts, moving on wasn't an option. They would carry this forward: prison sentences, custody loss, rehabilitation, and the impossible task of explaining to a child why her mother wasn't coming home. Justice had been served. The guilty were punished, but no one felt like they'd won anything at all. 2 years later, November 2025, at Al-Awar Women's Prison on Dubai's outskirts, Inmates follow structured daily routines: breakfast at 5 in the morning, lunch at 11, dinner at 5 in the evening. Jasmine, now 35 years old, works kitchen duty. Her uniform has a red patch, identifying long-term sentences. 16 more years remain. Letters arrive monthly from her mother in Cebu. They talk about her sister's teaching job, her father's dialysis schedule, the neighbor's son who joined the merchant marine. Never about Amara. Al-Mazrui family lawyers made that condition absolute. Any contact attempts would result in complete communication cutoff, so her mother writes around the absence, filling pages with everything except the one thing that matters. Jasmine folds these letters carefully, stores them under her bunk mattress. At night, when the cell doors lock and fluorescent lights dim to half power, she counts. 730 days down, 5,840 to go. Across the city in Emirates Hills, Amara turned 2 in January. She's discovered the photo albums Khalid keeps accessible because he believes children deserve age-appropriate truth. One afternoon, she points to a photograph from the hospital, Jasmine holding her newborn daughter, both exhausted and hopeful. "Who's that?" Amara asks the nanny who replaced Patricia 6 months ago. The woman, Lucia, from Kenya, trained specifically for difficult conversations, sits down carefully. "That's your mama. She lives far away because she made very serious mistakes that hurt people. When she come back? Not for a very long time, sweetheart. Many, many years." Amara studies the photograph with the intensity only small children possess. "She know my name?" Lucia's throat tightens. "Yes, baby. She knows your name." Rashid comes home evenings from physical therapy sessions at American Hospital. He walks with a cane now, his mobility improved through 2 years of rehabilitation. The cognitive impairments remain: occasional slurred speech, gaps in short-term memory, but he's functional in ways doctors hadn't predicted. He spends these evenings with Amara, reading picture books, building towers with foam blocks. One night, she asks the question he's been preparing for. "Why mama not here?" Rashid sets down the book they'd been reading. "Your mama felt trapped, like she was in a cage and couldn't breathe. And I helped make that cage. I didn't treat her with kindness or respect, so she tried to hurt me, which was very wrong. We both made terrible choices. You sad?" The question surprises him. "Yes, I'm sad we couldn't be better people for each other. And I'm sad you have to grow up without your mama." In Abu Dhabi's federal prison facility, Dylan marks his cell wall. 730 scratches. 8,270 days remaining. He'll be 56 when released, if he survives that long. He writes letters to Jasmine that guards confiscate immediately. Communication between co-conspirators is prohibited. But he writes anyway, filling notebooks with apologies no one will read. In Sharjah Central Prison, Tariq Hassan counts time on a sentence reduced to 6 years through his cooperation agreement. 2 years down, 4 remaining. Letters from his wife describe their daughter, Aliyah, now 7 years old and healthy. The surgery worked. Her heart beats strong and steady. But Tariq won't hold her again until 2029. When he closes his eyes at night, he sees brake lines and cutting tools. The guilt follows him into every dream. The insurance policy? $12 million. Never paid. Rashid survived, triggering the exclusion clause. Neither Jasmine nor Rashid received anything except medical bills and legal fees that consumed what savings remained. The mechanic's testimony? It sealed both convictions. Without Tariq identifying Dylan and describing the exact sabotage instructions, the prosecution's case would have been circumstantial. His cooperation transformed possibility into certainty. The coffee shop meetings? All photographed by Khalid's investigators and marina security cameras. Those 4 encounters between May and July 2022 provided the documented connection prosecutors needed to prove conspiracy rather than impulse. This is why details matter. Why surveillance cameras detect more than theft. Why financial records reveal intent. Why words spoken in food courts become evidence that destroys lives. Amara will grow up asking questions her family will struggle to answer honestly. Rashid carries the knowledge that his treatment of Jasmine created conditions for desperation. Jasmine will count 16 more years behind bars while her daughter becomes a stranger. Dylan will age in a cell, his gambling debts resolved through the worst possible payment. Tariq will send donations that can't erase what his hands did one August night in an underground garage. Understanding how Jasmine got there doesn't erase what she did. Cutting brake lines was attempted murder, calculated and unforgivable. But ignoring how she got there guarantees it will happen again. Another woman trapped in a marriage that treats her as property. Another desperate person making unforgivable choices. Another child asking why. When systems fail women, when marriages become cages, when financial dependency becomes captivity, when the only exit appears to be violence, desperation fills that gap. And everyone pays. The victim, the perpetrator, the child left behind asking questions no answer can satisfy. Thank you for staying until the end. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Your support helps keep these documentaries going. Every story remembered is one less life erased.